Hello, Carole. Welcome again from the Women's Bookshop.
Thank you.
Now, the Ladies Litera-tea. I've heard that you get hundreds of people going along to these events. Tell me how it started.
Well, they get booked out, certainly.
Yeah.
In a way, a follow-on from the old Listener Women's Book Festival, which ran for the whole decade of the 90s.
I've forgotten about those.
And then I ran Women's Book Weekends, which are rather too long, and we condensed it down to an afternoon. And we just line up. I mean, the basic criteria is you have to be a New Zealand woman with a new book published in this year, the year of the Litera-tea. So we ran one a year. They started off quite small, they got bigger and bigger. We moved finally to the theatre, the Ray Friedman Arts Centre at Epsom Girls, because they also have a big rehearsal room where we can put out the whole afternoon tea.
Right.
So part of the attraction is you get food for the mind, but also food for the body.
Stonking big afternoon tea,
It's
full of good stuff.
And we have 3 tiered cake plates and all the traditional things that our grandmothers would have made. In yours and my case, probably our mothers. So lamingtons and melting moments and Nenish tarts and all those wonderful things. And there's just a fabulous, delicious display of lovely food. And we stop in the middle. So there are 6 authors on beforehand. They all have sort of 15 to 20 minutes each. Yeah. And then we stop for this huge afternoon tea, which is all set out. And I have a huge
don't eat lunch first,
I
yes.
have a huge team of volunteers who lay out all this wonderful afternoon tea. And then and authors sign books, so that we let the authors out first to fill their plates up and get the cup of tea, and then they go to the author's signing table.
So your next one's on the 25th of August, I see, Sunday. Okay.
Yeah.
So who have you got lined up for the next one?
6 come back for the second half. Well, we've got this wonderful lineup. First of all, 2 Girls in a Boat. Emma Martin, she's opening. Now, that's a wonderful collection of short stories. I love them. And the title story, 2 Girls in a Boat, won a Commonwealth Writers' Prize.
Is it a young adult book? By the way?
No. It's an adult short stories. Extremely varied and all outstanding.
Hard to buy short stories now too, isn't it? And
yeah.
Sometimes they're just right before you go to sleep.
Yes, yeah. Well, no, so we're starting off with a prize winner.
Yes.
Then we have something quite political. We have Alison McCulloch's book, Fighting to Choose, which is the abortion rights struggle in New Zealand.
Yes.
And she's traced the history of it. She's done a huge amount of research. And of course, it's an ongoing, a very passionate and ongoing debate, because we still have...
It's the issue that doesn't die, isn't it?
Yeah, it's an antiquated law that was brought in a long time ago, in the 1970s, and it still exists. Then we have quite a lot of fiction. The first of the novels is Judith White with her lovely novel, The Elusive Language of Ducks.
Now, you've already reviewed that on this show, and I've heard a few other very enthusiastic reviews.
Very good.
Yes.
Quite lovely. It's really about human communication and human relationships, but it's all done through the metaphor of her relationship with a duck.
It's such an unusual concept, isn't it?
Her mother has died and she's grieving, and so she's given a duckling to look after, and she becomes very attached to the duckling, and it almost becomes an obsession, really.
Yes. Yeah.
So quite fascinating.
Okay.
Then we have Barmaids. So this is an eclectic mix. We've got a lot of fiction. We've got a poet. We've got abortion. We've got barmaids. We're going to come to dolphins. All sorts of things. So
it's called Wanted and Beautiful Barmaids.
Beautiful Barmaids.
Women behind the bar in New Zealand.
Yeah, so Sue Upton has done, again, some fascinating research. And
I was just reading the back cover before we started, and I was astonished to see that there was a law passed in 1910 that said that women could not act as barmaids, and that stayed there until 1961. For 50 years, there were no women behind the bar. It's just astonishing.
Well, they were seen either as, sirens who were going to lead men to drink, entice men, or else they were sort of, pure virgins who were going to get corrupted by being behind a bar. So
it was in the days of the 6 o'clock swill, wasn't it? So maybe.
So I think one of the things she reveals, it's an interesting social history, and then it looks at our society's relationship to alcohol, which is fascinating.
Which is very confused and difficult. Yes.
And then Anne Kennedy with this marvellous novel, The Last Days of the National Costume.
People keep talking about this book and saying how truly good it is.
Fantastic. Now, I should mention at this point that Anne Kennedy, it's just been announced that she is a poetry finalist in this year's New Zealand Post Book Awards. She is one of the 4 poetry finalists. So she's, so talented.
I know she's a good poet, but,
and
wonderful book as well. That's quite some talent, isn't it?
It is. Yes. And you're aware that this book is written by a poet. Beautifully written.
What's the national costume?
The national costume is an Irish dancing costume. It's set in Auckland in the electricity blackout in downtown Auckland in 1998. And the main character, Go-Go, Go Sligo, is an ex-academic who is now a seamstress, and she spends the entire novel mending this gorgeous Irish dancing costume, and the costume almost becomes like a character in the novel.
Right.
Then, right before the afternoon tea, afternoon tea break, we have The Caker with Jordan Rondell. Now, we always try and have a food book right before the afternoon tea, just to whet everyone's appetites. These are really unusual cake recipes. A lot of them are gluten-free, but they're also sort of slathered and lathered with all sorts of delicious things as well.
Gosh, it's an indication of how many top cooks there are in New Zealand now, when I have to confess I've not heard of Jordan Rondell. So
she makes cakes.
Obviously, she's a goodie.
Cakes for special occasions, really.
Lovely.
Then we come straight back after this elaborate afternoon tea for the wonderful Rosemary McLeod with Bold Needle and Thread, which is the vintage needlecraft, and she's got projects in here that you can actually make.
Now, the last book she did was about knitting, I think, wasn't it?
Well,
and
it was
one,
not just knitting. It was
what
all
was then the
sorts
Montana Award.
Yeah, and it's out of print. It's out of print now.
Yeah, what a shame.
And that was fascinating. That was all sorts of crafts, again, not just knitting. This is particular needlework, and there are all sorts of projects like bags and tea cozies and cushion covers, but she also has a history. I mean, she's done a lot of research, so it's social history, little tidbits in there. It's an absolute gem and a gorgeous
this era
book.
when retro skills are really popular amongst young women, this will probably sell very well, won't it?
Yeah, it's
not just to old fans, but young ones as well.
Yeah, hopefully. It's a gorgeous book, and of course Rosemary's, she'll be delightful as a presenter. Then Aurewa McLeod with Who Was That Woman Anyway, which I've also reviewed on this session, I think, on this program with you. It's very much a lesbian novel, wonderfully honest and forthright, and is very autobiographical. And a lot of women will know Aurewa because she was an English lecturer at Auckland University for 35 years and ran a very famous women writers paper.
Right.
And it's a fantastic novel, and she's a very good presenter. Then we have Therese Lloyd coming up from Wellington, from Victoria University Press, with a poetry book called Other Animals. And I try every year to promote the new young upcoming writers and get their names a bit more familiar.
And really nice in an intense session like this to have some poetry read, because a nice sort of change in texture and rhythm from having people talk about fiction or whatever.
It is. It's lovely. It's a nice contrast. Then 2 books from Mandy Hager this year. Mandy Hager is a fantastic writer of young adult novels, and every novel she writes gets shortlisted for the teenage fiction section of the New Zealand Post Children's Book Awards. And so The Nature of Ash was shortlisted this year.
Where is she from?
She's actually Ramati South. She's coming up from near Wellington. And the new one is Dear Vincent, and it's actually about suicide, but it is, I haven't read it, I'm about to read this one. It is very positive and very uplifting and very life-affirming. Right. But she's quite a political writer.
Which must be a hard thing to pull off when you're talking about suicide.
I think, yes, but she's brilliant.
But very necessary too in this age when we worry so much about
I agree.
Young people
and she will do it extremely well. Mandy. She's quite political. She's very aware of the issues. She knows what affects young people, and is very positive. Then, second to last, we've kept her towards the end because it's about how to write. The writing class by the wonderful Stephanie Johnson. Who's one of our best writers in New Zealand, and she reveals her secrets in this, and it works brilliantly on 2 levels. So it's a very funny, blackly funny love story, but it's also about how to write a novel, because the main character, Merle, is a writing teacher. Right. And she takes you through, each chapter she's teaching the class something else. So if you follow the book through as a budding writer, you will have instructions.
They're all about structure and characterisation and bloody blah.
How to write a novel. So there it is. There's a real gem in that. And then we're ending with the dolphins. Dolphins Down Under. Now Liz Slutin is coming up all the way from Dunedin. She is Associate Professor of Zoology at Otago University. And she has done a 30-year study of our Hector dolphins. They are under threat, and she's passionate about them. And of course, we'll have a big screen and have visuals. So we'll end the afternoon with these wonderful visuals of of our New Zealand dolphins.
And it's hard to think of anyone who's not passionate about dolphins, really. Right. Just today online I was reading about some new scientific research that is indicating that dolphins really do have names for each other and that they call out to each other with particular names, and so do whales apparently.
Yeah. Well, Liz will talk about their communication, I think. It's one of the things that she deals with in the book.
Yeah. Well, so what an amazing
the other thing, can I mention one other book that's not here, just because it's such exciting news, that Eleanor Catton, aged 27, with her second novel, The Luminaries, has just been longlisted for the Man Booker Prize 2013.
Which is the big prize.
It is the big prize. Yes. She is not in this Ladies Litera-tea because she won't be in the country on the 25th of August, but I have her booked for the second Ladies Litera-tea on the 3rd of November. So
would Lloyd Jones have been the last New Zealander who was in the fire? He was shortlisted,
he was
I think,
actually
for
shortlisted.
Pip, was it?
Mr. Pip, yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So of course, Eleanor at 27 to be on the long list.
Isn't it? Yes. And it's a New Zealand novel. It's about New Zealand, isn't it? Set in New Zealand, I think, in colonial New Zealand. Yes. So that's just astonishing, isn't it? Carole, what is it about events like this? Why do people want to pay money to go and sit down in a darkened room for 4 hours or something and just listen to people talk about writing and books?
Well,
what is it?
There are literary festivals just happening, blooming all over the world. I think people who love books love actually hearing the writer's own voice and meeting the writer. And a lot of our audience like the authors to sign their books for them and sign them personally. So there's something about having contact with the author of a book that you've loved. The appeal of this, I think, and we now do 2 a year. We started off doing 1 a year. We now do 2 a year because the demand was so high, but also because there was so much good stuff coming out from New Zealand women writers. We couldn't fit them all into one afternoon.
It's amazing, isn't it? When the publishing world's in turmoil, all of this talent is still there.
Still there. And I
how much is a ticket?
I don't think the food's an attraction as well, Lindsay, I have to say that.
How much is a ticket?
The tickets are $60 for the whole afternoon, and that includes your afternoon tea.
And people would book through the Women's Bookshop. Yes, I'm sure it'll be a grand day on August 25. Thanks for coming in, Carole.
Thank you, Lindsay.